Okay. Now, like I said, there's a whole bunch of really big ideas packed into this that we really don't have a lot to talk about. Oh, okay. Here'd be a good data point. So, like, if we're talking about really high, so like skewed this way, if you were looking at the heights of a roster of a basketball team, all right, you're going to have a lot of really tall guys right in here. Okay, so most of a basketball team, they're going to be the data is going to be skewed left because there's going to be very few short guys and a whole bunch of really tall guys. Okay, I guess this one might be the height of some, although I would say the height of jockeys is probably a lot more flat than this. Let's see, what would be something that would be fat or someplace where they would be packed in the low amounts.
Wrestling.
This is everybody's Algebra 1 grade after the coronavirus. Instead of having any high grades, everybody's down here just barely above an F. No, just kidding. Anyway, so I don't know. You could think of some data points that would be skewed lower. Like, what would you think? What'd you say?
I was wondering if wrestlers.
Yeah, they're kind of all spread out all over the place. Anyway, well, I should have thought about that a little bit more. All right.
Toddlers
Okay.
and their IQ points.
All right. Anyway, we're going to move on. Okay, go. So we've had unimodal, which is one mode. But unimodal could either be normal, skewed right, skewed left. Okay. This one is what we call uniform. The best data that I would say would be uniform is like rolling a dice. If you just had one die, okay, and you're rolling it, you should get equal. You should get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 in an equal amount as long as the die wasn't loaded. Okay, so that to me is the best. Anytime you roll a die, you should get a uniform data. So notice it's equally spread out all the way across. No highs, no lows. It's just as likely that you're going to get a 1 as that you're going to get a 6. Okay. Also, so a uniform, it's kind of hard to see what uniform because this could look a lot like a normal curve here as well. But maybe in the normal curve, the boxes would be a little bit smaller. But anyway, this is different. Uniform is different than symmetric. Okay. Uniform means that there is no highs, there is no lows. There's all the mean and the median are still in the middle, but every single one of these could be a mode. Okay. It's equally likely that you're going to get any one of these results. Okay, very, very seldom does that happen, and if it ever does happen, the data isn't very useful. Okay, all right, now notice this one has one mode. Okay, we call that unimodal. All right, and that's if it's symmetric and unimodal, then we call that a normal curve. Most of your data in real life you're going to find is going to be unimodal, but you could have bimodal. Okay. The best data, if we were in class, the best data I would produce is a roster of a football team, okay? The thing is, on a football team, is you have a whole bunch of guys that are stuck right in here between 180 and 220 pounds, right? And then you've got a whole bunch of guys up here that are between 290 and 320 pounds. Anybody that's like between 240 and 280, you're probably either too slow to be a skills guy, or you're too small to be a lineman. Okay, so there aren't a lot of guys in the NFL that are between 240 and 280 or so. So you're either really small and fast, or you're really big and can move people. So this is a good example of a football roster. Okay. This one is gap. This one happens very little. Okay, so again, unimodal, bimodal. Okay, that should say bimodal. That's bi meaning two. Okay, this happens very rarely. Okay, so this is a gap. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the outlier here. This is probably one of the most important things on this whole worksheet that we're looking at, and I know Mr. Gimmel's going to talk a lot about an outlier. Outliers are really interesting in that either you ignore them completely because you think your data is wrong, or that experiment went awry, or that's exactly what you're looking for. And here's what I mean by that. So let's say that we had a whole bunch of businessmen in a room, okay? And, you know, the normal guy is here and he's probably going to make, I'm just making this up, but let's say that the average guy in the business room is making $60,000, okay? There'll be some that are making a lot less, $30,000. There'll be some that are making a lot more, $150,000, Okay, I'm just making these numbers up. But most of your people are going to be packed in there pretty good, right? All right, now all of a sudden Bill Gates walks into the room. Okay, and the amount of money that he makes is clear up here. Now you can either do two things. You can just say, okay, well, I'm going to ignore Bill Gates because his whole world is so completely different than everybody else's that I'm really just talking to the room. I'm talking to these guys that are somewhere between 30,000, 150,000, and depending on your situation, that might be the case. Or the other way you could look at it is you could only pay attention to the outlier and say, okay, well, Bill Gates just walked into the room. He's a billionaire. I mean, the amount of money that he makes is way, 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 way different than everybody else. So we're gonna focus on him and say, okay, well, what is he doing different than everybody else, or whatever. Okay, so sometimes you ignore the outlier. Sometimes you give all of your attention to the outlier. It just completely depends. The thing about an outlier, as soon as Bill Gates walks into the room, that mean, that median, the mode's not going to change, and the median is barely going to change at all. But the mean, that outlier is going to pull that mean way up here. So all of a sudden, the average amount of salary of the people made in that room, Bill Gates completely changes that. Okay, so again, when you're trying to figure mean, median, mode, most of the time you ignore outliers. Okay, when you're looking for some experiment that makes a whole bunch of different than all the others, then the outlier is something that's very interesting. Okay, outlier is an extremely important idea when it comes to statistics. Okay, so this happens very rarely where there's a big gap and there's two completely different sets of data. I would say that one thing you could look at, like, is if you quiz your mom about how many texts her friends send. It probably is higher now, but back in the day it was pretty low. And like if you had a teenager and the amount of texts that they sent, it was pretty high. So there could be a gap there. Okay, so we've talked about all the different features of a graph. Okay, we've used the words like uniform, unimodal. There's a gap. There's a normal curve with an outlier. That's a really big word right there, outlier. Okay. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to come down here and I want you to use one or two words. Use as many words as you possibly can to describe these. All right. Then go ahead and take a picture of it and send it in to me. Okay. That'll get you prepared for your quiz tomorrow.